Port Authority told our parents that this was going to be urban renewal stuff happening in our community, and really it was really actually urban removal. Um, where we're sitting at today, is West Side Story 2. This is the second story of West Side. The original West Side was about a mile from here, down about half a mile from here. That's where the original neighborhood house was. That's where this multicultural community was. That's where I was raised. One of the things that happened in that community was that in the 50s there was some major flooding. The river overflowed, and we lived in a sexplex, and the river water went all the way up to our porches. I mean, so we had to evacuate. So during those two major floods that happened in the 50s, we evacuated, and when the waters receded, we went back in and we cleaned up our houses and all that. Neighborhood House and the Red Cross were really instrumental on really helping the families there back then. So anyway, the Port Authority got this idea that the area that we lived in, it was called West Side Flats. They felt that was because of all the flooding. It's a dangerous place to live. Blah 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 blah. We got to get you folks out of there to a better place. So that's what they did. But what happened is that the Port Authority came in there and said, "This is what we're going to pay you for your property. Take it or leave it." Because otherwise, if you don't take it, we'll just do eminent domain. So a lot of folks, including my folks, they really got hoodwinked for what they got for their property. So the Port Authority went in there, started in the late 50s, early 60s, and they demolished everything. Our houses, our churches, our grocery stores, our neighborhood house, just wiped it off all on the map. And and I know later on I'm sure you know about the Trail of Tears that happened to the Cherokee Indians, and they were moved west of the Mississippi. Even though our move wasn't as drastic, but I think our spirit was just broken, just like those Indian spirits were broken when they had to move. Even to this day, people still are really upset about what happened to us back then. And the biggest insult for us. And I think this is what really gets that generation of my father's generation, the folks that are in their 70s and 80s and 90s. What riled them the most was after they kicked us out, after they demolished everything, they put up a flood wall so the place doesn't get flooded anymore. And it was like, why didn't you do that right away? So they moved us out. So we had to move out. So now where are we going to go? Where this community is, where we are today. This community back in the 40s and the 50s and the 60s was primarily white folks living in this community. So when this community heard that we're going to be moving, they got frantic. So they started a petition that's saying, "Hey, we can't let these Mexicans move up here." They went to the city. I mean, all this stuff is documented. They went to the St. Paul City Council and said, "You can't let all those Mexicans, all those minorities from the West Side Flats move up here because they're gonna ghettoize our community. They're gonna make troublemakers of their children." So they're all paranoid. And but unfortunately, whatever it was, we still came. We moved up here, and what's interesting then is that a lot of these folks that lived here moved to another part of the West Side, further up the hill. That area up there started calling themselves the Upper West Side, and us that live around here are called the Lower West Side, man. And upper and lower, that's already saying something. This was during the 60s. It was a great time happening during the 60s. A lot of stuff going on. A lot of stuff, man. All kinds of different movements going on. The Chicano movement, the Black Panther movement, the women, the hippies. Everything was happening. Everything was happening. And so we were doing our own little thing here on the West Side, too. I happened to have a group. We called ourselves the Brown Berets. People really saw us as a kind of a threat, revolutionaries, and I think, well, the way we were dressed with the berets and all that stuff gave some indication of that. The Chicano movement started in the late '60s. We were saying, we were demanding, we were asking, we were saying all this stuff, which kind of contradicted with my father's generation. My father's first generation that came here to Minnesota. Again, honest day's work for honest day's pay, be respectful, all those kinds of things. Believe in authority, don't question authority. So when we started the movement and started questioning our authority, I mean, that all those folks were saying, oh, wait a minute, what are you doing, man? You know, you can't be doing this stuff. You know, you can't be questioning the police. You know, when we were asking the hospitals, you know, where's the translators? Not that we don't have translators for some of our folks, man. You know, that went to the waste. You know, we're questioning, and but it was interesting though. It was interesting that in 1970, the packing houses, Swift and Armours, which became a multi-billion-dollar meat packing industry on the backs of a lot of West Siders and Mexican Americans that worked there, they closed their doors. They closed their doors. And for my father generation, it was like the bubble burst. When they worked at Swift's and Armours, there was better pay than working out in the fields. The working conditions were better than working out in the fields, but yet there was still some discrimination and racism going on out there. But again, as long as they had a job, Swifts, you know, with their credit union, you know, people were able to get a loan to get their first car, get their house. So, you know, this was the place. And then when they closed the shop, I remember being here on the west side, being at the Cozy Bar. It was filled with men that got laid off. It was a sad day on the west side to see grown men cry and think, oh, it was upsetting. So during this time, I was able to talk to my dad and his friends about the Chicano movement. You know, asking my dad and his friends, you know, like, you know, I know you guys are hard workers. How many Mexican Americans were supervisors at Swift? You know, none. You know, how many union representatives were Mexican American? None. You know, so after a while they started hearing, you know, getting a little bit of it. Where my father, bless his heart, man, it was probably, I think in '71, he asked me he wanted one of my brown beret coats to wear, man. He was going to be a brown beret, man. So that was real cool. He finally got it. If you can't talk about the West Side without mentioning the Our Lady of Guadalupe Church or the Neighborhood House, there's no way, because both of them have been icons in our community. You know, Neighborhood House was founded in 1897 by some Jewish women, and they were there to prepare, getting ready for all the folks that were coming in from Northern Europe. So now it's like it's coming all over again. You know, now we got Europeans starting to come over again. There's been an explosion. It's, especially in the last 10 to 15 years, of all the Hispanic cultures come to our community. I mean, they come from Central America, they come from Mexico, South America. They're coming from all over the place, you know. And then probably within the last 5 years now we're getting folks coming in from other continents. We're getting folks coming from Africa, East Africa, West Africa. And there's that 3 programs that they started back in 1897 for those newly arrivals was learn English, citizenship, and a place to honor and celebrate traditions and culture. Well, you turn the clock forward to 2007, 3 of the 30-some programs that we do at Neighborhood House are English classes, citizenship, and a place to honor and traditions and stuff. My granddaughter enrolling in childcare in the early 90s, that made 4 generations of my family that had used Neighborhood House services. And again, my story is similar to lots of folks that have been here, use the Neighborhood House. And it was interesting for me as an employee to see some of the young people that I worked with over the years, and now seeing their children coming to the Neighborhood House, into our youth programs and doing things like that. So yeah, it's really cool. And I think in this 1997, when we celebrated our centennial, we had a picnic, dinner, and there was folks that were with Neighborhood House in the 30s and the 40s that came and just talked heartfelt thoughts of Neighborhood House, what it meant to them when they were growing up, and I could certainly relate to them because it meant the same thing to me too.